Hey everyone, hope you're having an amazing day. If you've ever watched someone build a dream with their bare hands, you know it's never just hard work. It's 100 battles nobody sees. And for Diep, the battles don't come one at a time. They stack. Things had finally started to feel stable. The second shipment went well. The produce arrived crisp and green, and a few old customers who had turned away were slowly coming back. Diep was doing exactly what she promised, rebuilding from the roots, staying honest, staying consistent. That's when Vi decided to tighten the net. Vi doesn't fight Diep in public. Vi fights her in the fields, where the vegetables grow, where the farmers live, where loyalty is won one handshake at a time. It started quietly, a farmer mentioning, "Someone came by yesterday." A neighbor saying, "There's a new buyer offering contracts." Then the details got sharper. Vi was going house to house, pushing exclusive deals. She'd smile. She'd promise a price so high it sounded like relief. Short-term money, long-term handcuffs. And it wasn't because Vi wanted to build something better. She wanted to cut off Diep's supply, to force her into a corner where she'd have only two options: sign Vi's conditions, conditions designed to trap her, or lose the produce entirely and watch her business collapse. When Diep first heard it, she tried to stay calm. "Okay," she told herself. "I'll talk. I'll explain. I'll negotiate." But business here isn't only numbers. It's trust. It's names. It's relationships that take seasons to build and minutes to break. So Diep didn't sleep much that week. One morning she's at Tu's place, sitting on a low stool, trying to keep her voice steady while she asks the question she's scared to ask. "Tu, have people been signing?" Tu doesn't answer right away. He looks toward the rows of plants like he's weighing the future. Then he sighs. "Some have," he says. "Not everyone. But they're scared, Kane. They see the big numbers. They worry you can't match it." Diep nods, like she understands. But inside she's spiraling, because the truth is she can't match it. Not if she wants to survive. Vi can afford to overpay for a while because she's not trying to run a stable system. She's trying to break one. Diep leans forward, hands clasped. Tu, I'm not asking people to choose me because I'm loud. I'm asking because I'm consistent. I'll pay fair. I'll show up. I won't disappear when things get hard." Tu's eyes soften. "I know. But you have to move fast. If you lose this season, you lose everything. Move fast." That phrase followed her all day. She went from house to house, to farms she'd visited a dozen times, to people she'd shared meals with. She smiled until her face hurt. She explained until her throat went dry. She reassured families even when she had nothing left to reassure herself with. And every time she thought she'd made progress, she'd hear it again. Vi was here this morning. Vi brought a contract. Vi said if we don't sign now, the price drops next week. Exclusive contracts meant once a family signed, Diep couldn't buy from them anymore. Not without turning neighbors against each other. Not without looking like the villain. Meanwhile, James was drowning too, just in a different way. After the first shipment disaster, he became almost obsessive about not letting it happen again. He cold truck checks, packaging routines, delivery timing, every run like a final exam. And at first, that focus saved them. But lately, work wasn't just work. It was urgent meetings, sudden calls, last-minute changes, the kind of environment where your phone can't be on silent for 5 minutes. So, Diep and James were doing this strange dance where they loved each other deeply and still kept missing each other. They'd send voice notes instead of conversations. They'd share quick meals that felt like pit stops. At night, they'd lie close, both exhausted, both carrying the same fear. One more mistake could ruin everything. Then, Nye's school event showed up on the calendar. It wasn't a small thing. Nye had been practicing for weeks. Her lines, her song, her little movements on stage. She talked about it at breakfast. She talked about it on the way to school. She talked about it while brushing her teeth. And for the first time in a while, the house had something bright in it. "Mom," Nye asked one night, holding the invitation like it was a prize. "You're coming, right?" Diep looked up from her phone, saw the hope in Nye's eyes, and felt a sting in her chest. "I'm coming," she said immediately. "I promise." Nye turned to James. "Dad?" James smiled. "I'll be there. Front row. I wouldn't miss it." Nye's face lit up, and for days, she measured time by that event. 2 days left. Tomorrow. Tomorrow for real. The morning of the event, Diep tried to plan ahead. She packed early. She rearranged calls. She told herself she'd handle farm issues quickly, then leave by lunchtime. James checked his schedule. "I've got a meeting, but it ends at 1. I'll go straight from there." Diep nodded. "Okay, we'll both make it." For a moment, it felt possible. Then Diep's phone rang. It was Tu, and his voice didn't sound like usual. Tight. Urgent. "Khan," he said, "Vi's people are here. They're blocking the pickup. They're telling households not to load for you. They say you can't take anything unless you sign the contract." Diep's stomach dropped. "What do you mean blocking?" she asked, already grabbing her keys. "They're standing at the entrance," Tu said, "pressuring everyone. If you don't come now, they'll take the whole batch." The whole batch. That wasn't just lost money. That was customers waiting. That was the reputation she'd just rebuilt, cracking again. Diep looked at the clock. She looked at the invitation on the table. She looked at Nye's costume laid out neatly on the couch. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Not today. Please, not today." But the world doesn't care what day you need it not to be. She texted James fast. "Emergency at the farms. Vi blocking supply. I'm going now." Still trying to make Nye's event. She didn't wait for a reply. She got in the car and drove like her heart was chasing her. And while Diep sped toward the fields, Nye was at school, rehearsing one last time, glancing at the door every few minutes like she could already see her parents walking in. Back at the office, James saw Diep's message and exhaled hard through his nose. "Emergency at the farms. Vi blocking supply." He leaned back in his chair for half a second. Eyes closed. Not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. He'd been living in the thin space between hold it together and everything falls apart. And now, the two worlds were colliding again. The business bleeding on one side, their child's heart on the other. He checked the time. His meeting was scheduled for noon, and it was one of those "you can't miss this" meetings. The kind that comes with urgent labels, big faces in the room, and consequences if you're not there. He'd already pushed it once this week. Pushing it again might not be an option. Still, he told himself, "I'll make it. I'll leave the second it ends." He typed back quickly, "I'll be there for Nye. I'll get out as soon as I can. Be careful." He stood up, grabbed his jacket, then paused. He almost walked out right then. Almost. But his phone buzzed again, this time from his boss. "Need you in the room early. This is critical." James stared at the screen like it was a challenge. Then he turned and walked toward the conference room, jaw tight, telling himself it was only for a little while. At the farm entrance, Diep pulled up to a scene that made her blood run cold. Two men stood near the gate, arms crossed, calm like they owned the place. A few farmers hovered nearby, avoiding eye contact. Boxes were stacked, but untouched. Tu was there too, face tense, trying to speak gently to everyone like a man holding back a storm. When Diep stepped out of the car, one of the men looked her up and down and smiled. "Tu Diep," he said like they were old friends. "We've been waiting." Diep forced a polite expression. "Waiting for what?" "This is my pickup." The man tilted his head. "Not today. Today is, complicated." unless you sign. He held out a folder. The folder. Diep didn't take it. Move, she said quietly. The other man chuckled. Chi, don't make it ugly. People here already signed. They want stability. Diep's eyes flicked to the farmers, faces she knew, people she had trusted. Some looked guilty, some looked scared, some looked like they wished they could disappear. Tu stepped closer to Diep. Khan, careful. They came prepared. Diep swallowed. Prepared with what? Tu didn't answer, but his glance went to the folder again. Diep stepped forward. Listen, she said to the men, raising her voice just enough for everyone to hear. If you want to compete, compete fairly. Don't block someone else's pickup. That's not business. That's bullying. The first man sighed, almost bored. We're not blocking. We're reminding them of their contract. Diep snapped. They didn't sign with me. He smiled wider. Exactly. That's when Diep understood the trap. Vi wasn't just offering exclusivity to farmers. Vi was creating pressure from inside the community so that even households who hadn't signed would feel forced to fall in line because their neighbors already had. And if Diep resisted, she'd look like the one bringing conflict into the village. Diep's phone buzzed again. A message from Nai. Mom, I'm nervous. Diep's chest tightened. She typed back fast with trembling fingers. You'll do amazing. Mom and Dad are coming. I promise. Then she looked up at the gate, looked at the stacked boxes, looked at the clock. Move fast. Her voice softened when she addressed the farmers. Auntie and Uncle, I know everyone needs money. I'm not a champion. But I beg you all to think carefully. High prices are just a short-term trend. What then? What if they lower the prices next season? What if they impose conditions? I'm in this for the long term. I won't abandon you all. Silence. Then someone in the back whispered, But you can't pay like her? Diep nodded slowly. Right, I can't. Because I'm not here to burn money to destroy someone. I'm here to build something that lasts. The man with the folder stepped in again, voice smooth. Diep, we can make it simple. Sign this. You get access. You get supply. Everyone goes home happy. You still make it to your kid's event. That last line hit like a punch. Diep's eyes narrowed. Vi told you about my kid? He shrugged. Information travels. Don't take it personally. Diep's hands curled into fists. She wanted to scream. She wanted to rip the folder apart. But screaming wouldn't load the boxes. Rage wouldn't deliver the produce. And the worst part was, she knew time was running out. She looked at the contract. It wasn't just agreement. It was poison, disguised as paper. Terms that would tie her to Vi's distribution, force minimum quotas, penalties if she missed deadlines, clauses that could be used to legally destroy her later. A trap. But the produce was right there. Customers were waiting. Her name was on the line, and Ni's event was in a few hours. Diep took a shaky breath. Give me 5 minutes, she said. The man nodded, too confident. Of course. Diep stepped aside with Chu. Chu, she whispered. If I don't sign, we lose this batch. Chu's face creased with pain. If you sign, they own you. Diep looked down at her phone, at Ni's earlier message. Then another popped up. Mom, are you coming? Please don't forget. Diep's throat tightened so hard it hurt. At school, Ni was getting dressed backstage. Kids were giggling. Teachers were fixing collars, smoothing hair, checking lines. Parents were finding seats, lifting phones to record, pointing toward the stage. Ni peeked through the curtain. She scanned the crowd. Front row, second row, third row. No mom, no dad. She blinked fast, telling herself they were coming. They said they would. They always come. Well, not always. But this time they promised. This time was different. The music started. Nye's group walked out. She stepped into the lights, eyes immediately searching the audience again. She kept her smile on because she was on stage, because she was supposed to, because everyone was watching. But her hands started to shake. Somewhere in the back, a parent lifted their phone higher. Someone clapped. Nye looked again. Still no mom. Still no dad. She missed a beat. Then her face crumpled, not dramatically, not like a tantrum, like a kid trying to be brave but losing the fight. Tears spilled and she tried to wipe them quickly, but they kept coming. The teacher at the side of the stage mouthed, "It's okay. Keep going." But Nye couldn't breathe right. She kept standing there, small in the spotlight, doing her best to finish, while the one thing she needed most wasn't there. Afterward, she ran off stage and locked herself in the bathroom for a few minutes, pressing her face into her hands. When she came out, she didn't talk much. She didn't brag. She didn't smile for photos. She held her bag close, eyes down, and when a teacher asked, "Where are your parents?" she shrugged like it didn't matter. But it mattered. It cut deep. Back at the farm, Diep was still staring at the contract. Her pen hovered. Her mind screamed, "Don't sign." Her heart screamed, "But you'll lose everything." The phone buzzed again. This time it was James. Meeting got extended. "I'm trying. I'm so sorry." Diep stared at the words, stunned. The meeting got extended, like the universe was casually editing their lives. She typed back, hands shaking, "Nye needs us." No reply came immediately. Diep looked at the clock again. It was happening. The day was slipping through her fingers. In the evening, Nye came home quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that scares you more than yelling. Diep walked in, exhausted, dust on her shoes, contract folder in her hand. She expected Nye to run up, to complain, to cry, to demand an explanation. But Nye didn't. She sat on the couch, hugging a pillow, eyes fixed on the floor. James arrived later, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, guilt written on his face like bruises. He stepped inside and immediately said, "Nye." Nye didn't look up. Diep's voice cracked. "You didn't make it." James blinked, stunned by the flatness in her tone. "I tried. The meeting..." Diep cut him off. "You promised." James swallowed. "I know. I'm sorry." Diep turned toward the kitchen, set the contract down on the table like it was a weapon. "Do you know what I did today? Vi blocked the supply. I had to fight just to keep us alive." James followed her, voice rising slightly. "And I was trying to keep my job, Diep. I'm not choosing work over her. I'm choosing survival, too." Diep spun around. "You always say that." "Survival. Like her feelings are optional." James snapped back. "And you don't? You think what you're doing is different because you call it a dream?" Diep froze. The words hit hard. James kept going, anger finally spilling out. You're always running, always chasing the next crisis, the next deal. And when it's you, it's building a future. When it's me, it's choosing work." Diep's eyes filled with tears. "I'm doing this for us." James pointed toward the living room where Nye sat silent. "Then why does she look like that?" A heavy silence fell. Then from the couch, Nye's phone buzzed, a small sound in a big room. Diep walked over slowly and saw the screen lighting up with a message Nye had typed, maybe meant to send, maybe meant to be seen. "Mi oi, kon kong tich me banua." "Mom, I don't like you being busy anymore." Diep's breath caught. She turned back to the kitchen table. The contract was there, opened, waiting. The pen was there too. She picked it up. Her hand moved toward the paper. She was about to sign. Because that's what people do when they're desperate. They trade tomorrow for today. But then she looked again at Nye's message. and her grip loosened. The pen hovered, and for the first time all day, Diep didn't move fast. She just stopped. Because signing might save the business, but it might cost her daughter. And in that moment, Diep realized Vi wasn't only cutting off her supply. Vi was cutting through her family. And the worst part? Vi was winning, without even being in the room. The camera lingers on Diep's trembling hand above the contract. The ink ready, the choice not made. Cut to black. Vi launches a ruthless plan to strangle Diep's business by persuading local farmers to sign exclusive contracts, offering short-term high prices to cut off Diep's supply. Diep scrambles to protect trust with Tu and the growers, while James becomes overwhelmed by non-stop work pressure, causing them to repeatedly miss each other despite caring deeply. The biggest emotional blow hits on the day of Nye's school event. Both Diep and James promise to attend, but Vi's team blocks the harvest pickup and pressures farmers, while James is dragged into an urgent meeting. Nye steps onto the stage, scans the audience, and breaks down in tears when she can't find her parents. That night, a fierce argument erupts. Diep accuses James of choosing work. James fires back that Diep does the same, but calls it a dream. The episode ends with Diep frozen above Vi's trap contract after Nye texts, "Mom, I don't like you being busy anymore.